Hello, my name is Peter McCowan. I'm the Vice Principal in charge of Public Engagement here at Queen Mary. I'm also a fairly amateur magician. In this series we're going to have a range of different high-profile mathematical magicians coming along, performing their work for you and explaining a little bit about the mathematics behind that. This particular video you're about to see is a favourite of mine and involves some interesting things that you might not know about shuffling. So there's lots of different ways to shuffle cards, but it turns out that something called the Faro shuffle, which is also known as the perfect or the weave shuffle, where you split the cards and interweave them so that one fits exactly into the other, has some very interesting mathematical properties. It's a shuffle that I can't do very well, but fortunately I know a man who can, and so I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of my friend Brett Morris, who's going to explain to you something about the magic behind perfect shuffles and also how they can help in devising new ways of moving data quickly around a computer. Thank you very much.
For someone like me, to have a group of 50 people come out at this time at night when you could be comfortably at home and you want to come out and hear about card shuffling, that's kind of cool. Let me give you the background of how I got to where I am today. It starts in 1955. That's a long time ago. I was watching an American television show called The Howdy Doody Show. It was the first nationally broadcast children's show. And I was 5, 6 years old at the time. And I remember that the master of ceremonies, Buffalo Bob, did a magic trick. I was amazed. I was staggered. For Christmas, for my birthday, everything after that, I wanted a magic trick. When I was 12, I started entertaining at children's birthday parties in the neighborhood. I worked my way through high school doing magic. And when I was about 16 years old, a friend of mine taught me a trick. And I'll show it to you later tonight. To do the trick, I had to convert decimal to binary in my head, which in 1966 was cutting-edge technology to do that. But when you're 16, you learn to do foolish things, especially when it does a good trick. Well, then I was president of the math club in high school. I was really a geek. But I was president of the high school, and one month for the meeting, I gave a program on mathematical magic tricks. Now, most mathematical magic tricks, not like the ones that Professor McOwen does, but most mathematical tricks are pretty dumb. Think of a number, add 7 to it. Subtract 7 and tell me your answer, and I'll tell you what your number is. Well, okay, so I gave my talk on that. Now, 3 years later, I'm a senior in university. I'm now vice president of the math club. I didn't make it to president of the math club at university. I'm vice president. I give another talk. Now, the first time I gave the talk in high school, I included the card trick I'll show you tonight. I did it again when I'm a senior in college. The tricks were more sophisticated. Think of a number, multiply by 7. Now take the answer and divide by 7 and tell me the quotient and I'll tell you what your number is. But I also did the card trick again. Well, now 2 years later, I'm in graduate school. I'm taking a course in number theory. And my professor did something shocking, and I hope this will not be too disturbing to you when I tell you what he did. He assigned a term paper. Now, yes, look, one of the wonderful things about majoring in mathematics is you don't have to write term papers. That's what I didn't like about English and history. So what am I going to do? Well, I went home for the semester, and I said, oh, you know, that card trick that my friend taught me when I was 16 has some interesting math in it. So that was my term paper. I got an A on it. Then my professor said, have you thought about getting this paper published? And I said, no. He said, well, why don't you submit it? Well, I submitted it, and I got it published. Next semester, a visiting professor is at our campus, and he is looking at polynomials. He's looking at permutations, and he's looking at the minimum and characteristic polynomials associated with those permutations. He was absolutely stuck. He and my professor were looking at it. They couldn't get anywhere. And my professor said, why don't you take a look? Well, I stared at the permutation. And in one of those blinding moments of insight, I realized that this was the type of shuffle that an octopus would do. Now, when you and I do a shuffle, we cut a deck of cards in half and we ruffle them every other one. An octopus would cut the deck of cards into 8 pieces. And then if you can imagine the cards going down in sequence as each of the tentacles releases a card, that's the way an octopus would do it. And of course, if he suffered a tragic accident with a motorboat and was a heptopus, the same principle applies. So I solved the problem. And my professor said, well, that's very good. Why don't you see if you can get it published? Well, I got it published again. Well, now we come to what's the climax of this story. I am a third-year student. I have passed my preliminary exams. I've taken all the required courses. It is now time for me to be assigned my problem. Now, those of you that have been through this type of training know what it is to be given your problem. So for the next 2 years, perhaps 3 years, you will live a monastic existence working on this one problem. So I go in to talk to my professor, and he says, well, you're here to talk about your problem, aren't you? I said, yes, sir. What do you like to do? And I said, well, you know, I really liked the permutation work that I did with Professor Hartwig that was connected to the card shuffling. Oh, well, if that's what you like, then you're through with your PhD. Just write an introduction to your papers, and we'll give you the degree. And I think I managed to say, oh, thank you, sir. And there I am, from Buffalo Bob in 1956 to getting my PhD in 1974, all based on the mathematics of card tricks. Well, enough about me. You probably came to see some card tricks. Let's do that. Now, let me share with you a pedagogical technique that I have perfected over the years. And that is, when I lecture, I periodically take small, hard objects and throw them into the class. That means if the students are not paying attention, they run the risk of being smacked in the head. He was paying attention. Very good. What's your name?
David.
David, would you take the cards out of the deck? Now, you'll notice that that's what's known as the summer deck of cards. Turn it over. You see some are red and some are black. That was a global maximum in the humor, so just enjoy it. Now, would you shuffle the cards for me? Overhand shuffle. Very good. Now, here's what I'd like to do. Why don't you come up to the table, because you'll need a surface. Would you put the cards down there? I want you to cut off about half the cards to you. Now, I'm going to let that be your chosen card. Now, before we do anything else, I'm going to have him indelibly mark the cards. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about my background. I worked, well, as we say in the trade, for an unnamed agency in the Washington area. I think you would say an unnamed agency in Cheltenham, but that's okay. When I retired, they gave me a very special gift. They gave me an invisible pen that writes in invisible ink. And so whenever I need to send a message back to my old home office, I can write a secret message with the invisible pen. Now, I'll entrust that to you, David. And what I'd like you to do on the back of the card, you see the triple line there?
Yep.
Would you sign your name on that?
Yep.
Except, I'm sorry, it's a ballpoint. Could you click it first? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you. And sign your name. Excellent. Now let me have that back. Okay. Click it. Now, I'll tell you how the trick works. I have special polarized lens in my glasses, so I can see his name on the back. It's really very easy. But to make it more interesting for you and the rest of the audience, would you look at the card and show it to them, and don't let me see it? So show your card to everybody.
It's
Okay,
been
now
picked
put it
up by
back.
the camera.
Yeah. Yes, I've got the monitor right in here. I'll check that. Okay, it's looking good. Okay, put the card back. Put the deck back together.
As it was before.
It's a lot easier if you leave your card on top.
Make it too easy.
Yeah. Okay, well, as long as you've done that, why don't you go ahead and shuffle the cards one more time for me, David? Okay, doing an overhand shuffle again. Ah, very good. That's great. You can put it down. Thank you very much, David. I appreciate your help.
Yep.
You can have a seat. Now, if I'm going to claim, I used to claim to be the only person in the world with a PhD in card shuffling. I have since found out there are easily 8 or 10 more. As far as I know, I'm the first with a PhD in card shuffling. Okay, I'm not the only one, but I think I'm the first. If I'm going to claim to be an expert in card shuffling, I should show you something about shuffling cards. What David was doing is what's called the overhand shuffle, and that's where you pull the cards off in clumps with your thumb like this. A very common shuffle that people often see is called the riffle shuffle. You riffle the cards together like that. If you do the overhand shuffle sideways, Magicians call this the Hindu shuffle. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was an Indian magician invented it, but that's a different way of doing it. The shuffle that I'm going to be talking about a lot tonight is called the Pharaoh shuffle or the perfect shuffle or the weave shuffle. Cut the cards in half, you butt the ends together, and then you interlace them every other one, just like that, perfectly. There's some interesting math associated with that, and it's a good way to cheat at the card game of Pharaoh. Now, I grew up in Texas, and out in West Texas they have a lot of cattle. A shuffle out there that's very commonly seen is called the cow shuffle. Obviously, some of you have seen cows. Our big rivals in school were the Aggies. They were students at Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. We didn't think the Aggies were very smart. This is what we called the Aggie false shuffle. This shuffle is very popular in Jerusalem in the springtime. It's a Passover. Okay. Maybe that was the global maximum. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm now going to do 3 perfect shuffles. Now, there will be a quiz later in the performance, and the answer to the quiz is 3. There's the first one. We'll do a second one. And then a third one. There we go. 3 perfect shuffles. We're almost ready for the grand climax. I need the card case back, David. Now, you saw the technique I used to get my first assistant. Time to pay attention. We'll try it again. What's your name? Carrie? Mm-hmm. Here's what I'd like for you to do, Carrie. I want you to take the deck of cards out, and we're going to use that as the table. Okay. And I'll hold the case for you. Okay. And now I want you to spell your name aloud and count down 1 card for each letter in your name.
Okay. C-A-R-R-I-E.
C-A-R-R-Y-E. That's not the way we spell it in the United States. I-E. C-A-R-R-I-E.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. You stopped at the 7 of diamonds. Would you turn that over? That has David's name on the back of it. You didn't. There it is.
I spelled my name wrong.
You spelled your name wrong. That's what I was thinking. And there's his name right on the back, the 7 of diamonds. Thank you. Would you like to know how to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, to do this, we're going to have to get a little bit into some mathematics. Let me pause. Now, let's analyze the trick backwards. Whatever I may have done when I was handling the cards up here and shuffling them, when I put the cards in the case and I tossed it out to Carrie, David's card, the 7 of diamonds, was down at position 5 in the deck. C-A-R-R-I, oh, E. You did spell it right. That's 6. My bad. Okay. That's one of the weaknesses, and I'll tell you what happened. Now, what I did is I relied upon a statistical quirk of American names. And I was commenting to Professor McGowan as we came here. I don't know if British names have the same quirk. And here's the quirk. In the United States, something like 75% of the names have 4 or 5 letters in them. My name is Brent, B-R-E-N-T, 5 letters. How many of you have 4 or 5 letters in your name? I'm just curious. Well, that's easily 2/3. Okay, so the quirk works here. Now, this is nothing more than a cultural and linguistic quirk. A German magician would use something different. A Spanish magician would also use a different number. It works best if you're able to count the letters in your assistant's name. And the problem with a name like Carrie, it could be C-A-R-R-I-E-E-Y, C-A-R-R-Y. And I should have said, Carrie, toss the deck of cards to someone else. Because I want to make sure it's a totally random choice. Now think about that. My quick unscientific sample is that 2/3 of the audience has 4 or 5 letters in their name. If I had been quicker on my toes, Carrie would have, with the probability of 1/3, we failed with Carrie. I mean, you're really not a failure, but as far as the trick goes, your name is bad. So you toss it to someone else. The probability of 2 failures in a row is 1/9. So say Carrie tossed it to Elizabeth. Then I would have said, Elizabeth, let's make sure it's really random. Toss it to someone else. Now the probability of 3 failures in a row is 1/27th. One more toss and it's 1/81st, and we don't have 81 people in the room, so my expectation is that within 4 tosses, I will get to someone that has 4 or 5 names. Now, I knew that the card was in position 5, so I'm always, well, I'll give you an example of when I really got burned, and it opened my eyes to the cultural dependence of this statistic. I was giving a talk at Cal State University in Fullerton. I'm talking away, I toss it out, and I say, what's your name? And they said, Rajiv. I don't know how to spell Rajiv. Rajiv, toss it to someone else. This time, Srinivas got it. And for the first time, I looked around and I said, oh my gosh, there are a lot of students from the Asian subcontinent at Cal State Fullerton, and every one of them is majoring in electrical engineering. And then I just sort of froze, and I said, what am I going to do? Well, the good news is, because I know it's in number 5, I can use some kind of quip like, well, that's not the way we spell it in the United States. There's your card, the 7 of diamonds. So what happened is David's card, and quite frankly, David, I didn't care what your name was at all. The only reason I asked was to pretend to be friendly and outgoing. Carrie's name I cared about. So when I got to her, it would seem natural that I would ask about my assistants' names. So David's card, which was the 7 of diamonds, was down in position 5. How did we get it there? Well, here's what happened. I got the cards back from him. I did a little bit of sleight of hand. Now, I'm not going to discuss sleight of hand. That's a very good book with the trick explained in it. In fact, can I use this as a... There is a real live example of the book. This is an astute man with very high caliber reading requirements. You can look it up. It's called The Invisible Pen. It's a magician's trick. I used sleight of hand, and I got David's card to the top of the deck. Now, the nice thing about getting a card to the top of the deck, whether I have a deck of 18 or a deck of 85, the top of the deck is the top of the deck. I don't have to look. I don't have to count. There it is. Then I took the card and I moved it from the top of the deck to position 5. And I'll show you how I did that in just a second. And then I tossed it out and Carrie got it. So now all we have to do is figure out, how did I get the card from the top of the deck to position 5? Well, that's where we get into a little bit of mathematics. Now, what I'm going to talk about is the perfect shuffle, or the Pharaoh shuffle, after the card game of Pharaoh. And there you can see a deck of 8 cards perfectly interlaced, every other one. That is what the Pharaoh shuffle is. You can look at it as a permutation. And now I'm getting ready to make a switch. And this is a switch that is so much easier in England. And here's why. In the United States, we start numbering our floors at 1, and then it's 2, 3, 4. You basically have G, or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So just imagine this is an elevator. And the top card is the ground floor, and then you're going down or up from 0. It doesn't work in the United States. It's just the students kind of stare at you blankly. But I love it here. You go, oh, yeah, just like an elevator. Okay, you can see that permutation. Deck of 8 cards. The card in 0 goes to position 0. Here's the example. 8 cards, top card. Top card stays on top. The bottom card stays on the bottom. The other cards are permuted this way. Now, here is the earliest reference to card shuffling I could find. Reginald Scott lived in the reign of James I. James was going around burning witches. Oh, that's okay. Witches deserve to be burned. He was also burning magicians. Now, I draw a line between witches and magicians. And so what Reginald Scott did is he explained how magicians' tricks work to save them from being burned at the stake. So the first book on magic tricks is The Discovery of Witchcraft. In grateful appreciation for this, James I burned all the copies of Reginald books that he could find and tried to burn Reginald too. Reginald fortunately escaped and a few copies survived. But the guidance is very good. If you can shuffle them nimbly, you can seem to work wonders. Now, very quickly, here's the card game of Faro. Faro was the most popular casino game in the United States until World War I. After that, craps, the dice game, became more popular. Today it's blackjack. There are 13 betting positions, ace through king. Suit does not matter. This is a card counter's dream. This is called the case. It has 13 wires on it. Each wire has 4 beads. 2 operators are required, the dealer and the counter. The dealer sits there and deals the cards. The counter moves over a bead each time a card is played. So you don't have to remember anything to do your card counting. The game does it for you. Now here's the way the game of Faro is played. Players bet. So you put your money down on one of the cards. The dealer shuffles the card. The first card doesn't count. We're ready for the first round. Doesn't count. That's a loser. That's a winner. Everyone, now, normally, let's go to the next one, then I'll come back to this where both are the same. Loser, yeah, it's a joker shouldn't be in there. Winner, 3 and a 10. Everyone that bets on a 3 loses their bet. Everyone that bets on a 10 has their bet matched. All the other bets stay the same. If 2 cards of the same value show up, like it happens. It happens, the probability of that happening is 1 over E. Those of you that have taken statistics can recall these weird theorems where the probability of anything in the limit is 1 over E. It seems like that happens all the time. So what happens, 1 pair of cards is dealt. That's called a turn. The house pays 1-to-1 on the loser-winner pairs. In case of a split, both cards the same, the house takes 1/2 the bet. Unsettled bets remain, new bets are played, 24 turns, no, new bets are made, 24 turns are played. When you get down to the last 6 or the last 3 cards, you bet on the order of the cards. That's where the house has a tremendous advantage. On the running game, for the first 24 pairs that are played, the probability is something like 50.5 in favor of the house to 49.5 in favor of the player. That's as close to a fair game as you can find in the casino, or as an even game as you can find in the casino. Now, why would being able to do the perfect shuffle help? Here's why. Every other card, winner, loser, winner, loser, winner, loser. When I finish, the deck's already divided in half. If I can perfectly shuffle them, all of these cards are losers, or all of these cards are winners, depending on whether I do this or I do that. Now, a strategy that is often seen even today is someone decides they have a lucky number. They will have a dream. In the dream, there will be three donuts in the dream. And so 3 is their lucky number, and they'll bet on 3. Now, if I'm the dealer and I notice that you're betting on 3 consistently, when I pick up the cards, if I can put an extra 3 over to this half, and after 2 or 3 times, I can have all the 3s in 1/2 of the deck. Then I can make you win, and then lose, and lose, and lose, and lose, and lose. Because I don't know where the 3 is in this half of the deck, but I know which half it's in. And as long as I'm perfectly shuffling the cards, I can make sure that your winning or your losing card, your lucky card, is either in the winning position or the losing position. Well, that's unique about the game of Faro. Now, John Neville Maskelyne, the famous London magician, he had Egyptian Hall on Piccadilly, and he played there for years. He had published a book called Sharps and Flats in 1894. You had card sharps, and the people they preyed on were the card flats. And he shows the first diagram of doing the perfect shuffle, or the weave shuffle. British magicians tend to call it the weave shuffle. American magicians call it the Faro shuffle. Go figure. I have biscuits for breakfast, and you guys have scones, and I have cookies with my tea, and you guys have biscuits. It just works that way. Now, here is what John Neville Maskelyne had to say about the perfect shuffle. And he's absolutely right. If you master it, it doesn't take, one of the biggest problems that beginners have, is they put too much pressure on the cards. It's incredible. I saw you guys doing it. It's just very gentle. You do it right, and they just weave together. So You put the quarter together very gently, and they go every other one, just together, and unfailingly. Now, Alex Elmsley was an early computer scientist in London, and he started looking at the two shuffles. Now, you remember that I told you you can have winner or loser. He called them an out shuffle and an in shuffle. If this is the top card, you can either shuffle the top card out or you can shuffle the top card in. Turns out there's some great formulas you can come up with. Now, there's a diagram. At the top, you see the unshuffled deck of cards. The top card is golden. On the right over here, you can see the top card is out, and here the top card is in. Well, of course, what does a mathematician want to do? They want to come up with a formula for everything. So there is the out shuffle. Now, there are the positions 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The card in 0 goes to 0. The card in 1 goes to position 2. The card in 2 goes to position 4. The card in 3 goes to position 6. Where does the card in position 5 go? To 10. It goes to double what it started. 0 to 0, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 3 to 6, 4 to 8, and 5 goes to 10. So, all of my clever special symbols. That's the problem of going from Mac to PC, or maybe it's US to UK. That's supposed to be a big brace there. The out shuffle, as a function, moves the card in position P to position 2 times P modulo n minus 1 if the deck of cards is even, modulo n if the deck of cards is in. Now, you guys do modular arithmetic all the time. This talk was being given at 1830 hours. In the US, we'd use modular arithmetic and say it was 6:30. But you'd know what I meant if it was 6:30 in the evening. You just divide by 12, take the remainder, and that's the residue, it's called. So this means in a normal deck of cards with 52 cards, the card in position P goes to position 2 times P modulo 51. And that's modulo n minus 1 in the size of the deck. The deck of cards I was working with had a joker in it, 53 cards. So the card in position P would go to 2 times P modulo 53. Now there's the end shuffle. You can see the top card shuffled in there. 0 goes to 1, 1 goes to 3, 2 goes to 5, 3 goes to 7. Same question, where does 5 go? 11. 5 goes to 11. So the formula is P goes to 2P plus 1. So the card in position I moves, the in shuffle I moves the card in position P to position 2P plus 1. And now it's modulo n plus 1 if n is even, modulo n if n is odd. Any of you that have ever done anything with modular arithmetic should be suddenly falling in love with shuffling in odd-sized decks because you use the same modulus. It tears you up when you have to change from one modulus to another and do your calculations. In an odd-sized deck of cards, everything is done modulo n, so that's going to make it easier. Now, I need to introduce some notation. Now, I assume they teach math majors this in British universities. In the United States, we're taught to always try to use at least one Greek letter in every paper that we write. It just has a way of clouding the mind of the general public, of the naive, and makes you look much smarter than you are. The only thing I've wondered to myself, what do Greek mathematicians do? But anyway, here's what we have. I'm going to define a function delta at the top, lowercase delta. It maps the set of shuffles, out and in, to the set of numbers 0 and 1. There are not many functions that map a set of 2 elements in the range to 2 elements in the domain. And here's what it is. Delta of a shuffle is 1 if the shuffle is in. It's 0 if the shuffle is out. If you can't remember that, look at the first letter of the name of the shuffle and think what number does it look like. More generally, that means the perfect shuffle, a perfect shuffle, moves the card in position P to 2 times P plus delta of S. So it's 2 times P plus 0 if it's an out shuffle, 2 times P plus 1 if it's an in shuffle. Now that makes a nice compact formula that I can, so instead of always having 2 cases, I can just use S to stand for a perfect shuffle. And here I say modulo the right thing, whether it's odd or even, but in fact, we're going to use odd-sized deck of cards. So here it is. Brace yourself, the fundamental theorem of Faro shuffling in odd decks. Sounded exciting, didn't it? You have to lecture in maths, you have to have some enthusiasm in what you're doing. Now, something else I'll point out. This is my theorem. You notice I didn't call it Brent's lemma. Brent's and Morris's inconsequential corollary. This is the fundamental theorem. It just sounds good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay. What does it say? Well, my sigmas died. If you take a sequence of shuffles, S1 to SK, perfect shuffles, it moves the card in position P to position, and there's supposed to be a sigma there, 2 to the K times P plus delta of the first shuffle, 2 to the K minus 1, plus dot, 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 plus delta of the kth shuffle, 2 to the 0. Or we can put that, and now there's the sigma. Oh well. 2 to the Kp plus this sum of deltas times powers of 2. Now, that's kind of ugly, but here's the cool thing about it. That just told me where every card in the deck went after any sequence of shuffles. That's pretty powerful information. That's not the way shuffles are supposed to work. The whole point of shuffling is you don't want me to know where the cards are after you shuffle them. But in fact, if you're restricted to perfect shuffles, I know where every card of the deck is. It's a formula. You have to sit down and grind it out. But I know where every card is. That is powerful information. Okay. Here's the proof. First shuffle takes the card in P to position 2P plus delta S1 modulo n. We're doing everything odd, so it's all going to be modulo n. But I'll tell you something that I'm concerned about. Many of you probably had a snack. We started at 6:30. You probably had a snack about 5:30. You said, I'm going to that maths talk. I'm just going to pick up a treat, have a Coke or something. And right now, you're probably starting to suffer from rebound hypoglycemia. This is not a good time to give a proof by induction. So let me go through it rather gracefully at a fast speed. Here we go. And the theorem's true! It is true. Now, as happens so often in mathematics, the really useful stuff is in the corollaries, in the special cases. You know, so I just proved this huge general theorem, and now we get to the special case. If 2 to the k is congruent to 1 modulo n, well, now you ask yourself, what does that mean? Well, that means if I take 2 to the kth power and divide the size of the deck into it, and I get a remainder of 1, then this special case holds. Well, let's look at a deck of 51 cards. Let's say that I'm not playing with a full deck. So I've got 51 cards. 2 to the 8th is 256. 256 divided by 51. 51 goes in 5 times, 255, with a remainder of 1. So there's an example right there. If you have a deck of 51 cards, 2 to the 8th is congruent to 1 modulo 51. Well, something special happens in this case. And what it is, the K shuffles move the card in position P to P plus a constant shift. Every card P is shifted by a constant amount. That's the same thing as cutting. I just shifted every card by a constant amount. Whatever location it started out in, it's now shifted by this many cards. Every card. Think about being in the Eye of London, and you just rotate it. Everyone is still in their same position, they're just now rotated around. That's what we're doing. Now that's interesting. Turns out, now, just so you know that I did pay attention in my literature classes, this is foreshadowing. Note this point, later in the talk, this foreshadows something exciting. That'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Okay, corollary 2. If P is 0, now you remember, after David chose the card, I told you I used sleight of hand to get it to position 0, to the top of the deck. So this is the case that applies to the card at the top of the deck. That means that the card in position 0 moves to 2 to the k times 0. I love multiplying by 0. I can do that in my head. I mean, it doesn't matter how big k is. 2 to the 856 times 0, the answer is 0. Works very well. What happens, the card in 0 moves to position 0 plus this sum of terms, 0 plus this sum of terms, and that's the shift. So if I wanted to shift David's card to the right location, and I know that it's 4 or 5, now the magician does have to be able to go C-A-R-R-I-E. I did mess up on that. That's my fault. If you can count to 5, then you know you want to shift the cards by 4. Now what this tells us is that we have a sequence of binary numbers with coefficients 0 or 1. We have a sequence of powers of 2, and the coefficients are 0s or 1s. Well, that's a binary number. Your 1s are the 2 to the 0. Then you have 1s, 2s, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s. And so the powers of 2 are 0, 1, 2, 4, and so on. Well, I wanted to put 4 cards on top of Peter's card. That means I need to shift it by 4. Now remember I told you there's going to be a quiz? What is the base 2 logarithm of 4? 3. Very good. That's the number of perfect shuffles I did. What I did is I took the shift, I converted it to a binary number. 4 as a binary number is 1, 0, 0. I then did 3 perfect shuffles, an in shuffle, an out shuffle, an out shuffle, and that shifted the top card to position 4 in the deck, or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It put 4 cards on top of it, which then made it, if I could spell names in my head and count the letters in them, would have put it in the right position. That's the trick that we did. And I think that's a pretty cool application of the mathematics of card shuffling combining with the magic. Now, let me show you how I did the shuffle. I am right-handed. This is something else I've learned. How many of you are lefties? I'm just curious. Not very many. Okay, lefties are a minority, but you're smarter than righties. And the reason you're smarter, if you have spent your entire life converting instructions from right-handed to left-handed, you are so good at it that you do it naturally. If you go to a right-hander and give him left-handed instructions, the right-hander just falls to pieces. So you left-handers, my hat's off to you for knowing how to do this. So I'm going to give you right-handed instructions, knowing that most of the audience will just barely follow. You lefties are going to be a step ahead of me. Okay, here's what I'm doing. I started out with the deck of cards in my left hand. 3 fingers opposite the thumb, the pinky on the bottom. Now here comes what I think may be the most difficult part of the trick. I'm going to cut it in half by eyeballing it. Just going to look at it, cut the cards in half. Now, here's a confession. I've been doing this now, oh dear, for over 40, almost 45 years. My eyes are getting to the point, I keep my reading glasses, my reading lens, a portion of the lens gets stronger and stronger. It's somewhat difficult for me to, I can tell the difference in the thickness between 2 cards. It's hard for me to tell the thickness of 1 card. That's just because my eyes are getting old. Well, we've got a deck of 53 cards here. When I cut it in half, it's 27 and 26. An even-sized deck of cards is easy because it's either 26-26 or it's 25-27, and I can tell that 2-card thickness. You guys are going to get to that point too in another 30 years, so just remember this. Okay, you do your best to look at it, and you cut it in half. Okay, now you can see how I've started to separate it like a book. Now I put the cards against each other, and I just want to get them square. So I don't want them, like that, at an angle or something. So I put them square to each other. Then I'm going to put the corners together, give a little squeeze, and they go right together every other one. Ta-da! Oh, please don't. Well, that is magic tricks and card shuffling. I think we've got time for a dynamic computer memory. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to show you how to build a computer memory. We're going to do this in silicon. We're going to design a chip and try to do it in 10 minutes. Moving kind of fast. There are two kinds of memories that I'm going to talk about. And this is terminology that was fashionable back in the 70s when I was getting started in doing my research. It kind of makes you feel old when you have to explain the cutting edge technology when you were first out of school. But that's okay. I'm getting old, so that's fine. We're going to have static memories. They are typically internal to a machine. They have no motion of the data. You put the data in one location, it stays there, and then you take it out. It has many ways to get it out, and an example of this is a RAM. I also think about what you used to see in older hotels. They would have these pigeonholes behind the reception desk, and you'd go up and you'd say, I'm in room 123. They would go to room 123, grab it, and immediately give you your data right there on the spot. That's a static memory. The data stays fixed. A dynamic memory is external. A hard drive is a dynamic memory. What makes it dynamic is the data must be in motion. If your disk is not spinning, you cannot access the data. There are very few access ports. You think about it, when the data is spinning around the disk, it's only when it goes underneath the read head that they're able to read the data off the disk. An example of that is a disk. A more practical example is in many dry cleaners, we call them dry cleaners in the United States. Do you have dry cleaners here? Oh, okay, the language isn't that different. In my dry cleaners, corridor cleaners in Laurel, Maryland, there is a big track that runs around the top of the store, and there's a chain on it. And it dips down right behind the counter, and all the clothes are hooked on the chain. So when I go in and I say, hey, I have order 123, the attendant pushes the button, the chain starts moving around, the clothes move all around the store, and then eventually order 123 comes down behind the desk, they stop it, and they hand me my clothes. That's an example of a dynamic memory. If the chain is not in motion, I can't get my clothes. Well, they get a ladder, I guess, and look and find it. Now, there is a quick, high-level circuit diagram. There's a static memory. Each one of the orange boxes, gold boxes, represents a storage location. Now, for purposes of this talk, I don't care whether that's a bit of information, a word of information, or an entire record of information. Stored in the chip, the way a typical RAM works, random access memory works, you drive the row, you drive the column, so you're taking the first half and the second half of the number, you send that information, whatever the data is comes out, and then you read it out. So you activate one of the rows, you then activate one of the columns. At that intersection, that one cell, that one storage location, allows its data to be removed, and it goes off the memory. If we did the same thing and we made it a dynamic memory, here are the same number of cells, but look, they're connected in a serpentine pattern. One of the cells connects to the outside world. If I want to get this data cell out, I've got to shift it all the way around, and it comes out. Well, when you're building a computer, you need to have the perfect blend of random access memory and then high-density, slower memory. I mean, it would be great if everything were as fast as your RAM, but that'd be very expensive. Disks are a lot cheaper, but they're very dense. So, and they're slower. So there's your trade-off. And so what you're doing is you're constantly trading off fast memory versus slow memory, expensive memory versus cheap memory. And it works pretty well. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a simple shift register memory. When I send a clock pulse to the circuit, whatever's in that cell shifts to this cell. Each one shifts, and it just goes in a circle. So without getting into the detail of flip-flops and then toggling and so on, I send a pulse, and the data moves to the next location. Now, one of the cells I'm going to call the read-write port and connect this to the outside world. I just filled it up with data. Now let's take an example. Let's say that I want to access data item 4 to the read-write port. How many times do I have to shift it? Well, it has to shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So data item 4 is shifted 5 times and it gets to the read-write port. Well, how are we going to do that? I'm going to set up a little register on my chip that keeps count of the content of the read-write port. And this is just a very, very simple. The circuit is so simple that a mathematician understands how to do it. I mean, that's, for those of you that are electrical engineers, if a mathematician can understand the circuit, it's really a simple circuit. So here's what we're doing. It's a countdown counter. And so it just starts at 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and that's all there is. Every time this shifts by 1, the next content will be 1, you decrement the counter. It shifts another time, you get 0 in there, you decrement the counter again. The next time you decrement, you start over again at 6. How do we keep track of all of this? Well, I'm going to put it in an arithmetic logic unit. The arithmetic logic unit is going to make a very, very simple calculation. You request data item Q. Data item Q goes in there. It takes the current content of the read-write port, subtracts Q from it, and that tells you how much the shift is. Well, you remember I asked how many times do we have to shift 4 to get it to the read-write port? Well, the current content is 2. So we take 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Mod 7 is 5. And it took 5 shifts to get it there. So we're talking about a fairly simple control mechanism. You have a counter that keeps track of the current content of the read-write port each time this shifts. You put in the data request Q. You do the very simple calculation RW minus Q, mod 7, and that tells you how much the shift is, and then you shift it and build it in silicon. And the data moves much faster in silicon than it can move with a spinning disk. Now, let's have a dynamic memory of size n. If we have a single path circular connection, the mean random accessing time is a half n minus 1. I call this the Chinese dinner theorem. My favorite Chinese restaurant, Hunan Manor in Columbia, Maryland, has these large circular tables with lazy Susans on them, rotating. We call them, do you call them lazy Susans? Oh, okay. This is great. We really have the same language. Then everyone orders their favorite dish, puts it on the lazy Susan. And then during the meal, you shift it around, and then you take a little bit out, and what a great way to share the meal. Well, here's where the Chinese lazy Susan dinner theorem comes in. The dish that you want is always on the opposite side from you, a half n minus 1 away. It seems like every time I want a little more of the cashew chicken, it's on the opposite side. And so on the average, we're going to have to shift it a half n, or half n minus 1. Now, if you have 2 paths, Harold Stone at the University of Massachusetts showed that you can access not in a half n minus 1, the theoretical minimum time is log 2 of n. That is a savings. If we have 1 path and we have a megabyte of memory, 2 to the 20th, with one path, the delay is approximately 500,000. With 2 paths, the delay is 20. If we have a giga memory, and we have 1 path, the average delay is 500 million. If we have 2 paths, the theoretical minimum is 30. A savings of 500 million to 30 is even enough that your government would notice. Certainly it was enough that my government noticed, and this was the first project that I worked on. U.S. patent 4,161,036, just in case you're interested. So here's our solution. Here's our problem. Design a better dynamic memory. We want to have a simple control algorithm for shifting data in the memory. We want to have 2 interconnection paths, and we want to achieve Stone's lower bound of log 2 of n. Remember I told you about the foreshadowing? You remember if the size of the memory is 2 to the k, and you perform k shuffles, k just happens to be log 2 of 2 to the k, that it then shifts all the data by a constant amount. That's what we're doing in this memory. All the data item, think of it as in a big lazy Susan in your table, and you're just shifting it around by a constant amount. We have the algorithm that does it. Except instead of shifting everything in a circle, we allow it to run across the middle of the table by these perfect shuffle connections. Here's what we do. Let n equal 2 to the k minus 1. Has to be an odd number. We have paths corresponding to an in shuffle and an out shuffle, because we just showed that the in shuffle and the out shuffle allows you to shift the data in log 2 of n. We compute RW minus Q, the same simple calculation that tells you the amount of shift that's required. We start in a register with k bits. Starting with the most significant bit, we do an in shuffle or an out shuffle, depending on whether it's a 1 or a 0. Now again, this is a circuit so simple that even I as a mathematician can figure out how to do it. Look at one bit. If it's a 1, you do one action. If it's a 0, you do the other action. I know that much about electrical engineering. By corollary 1, these K-shuffles shift the memory by exactly the right amount. They do it in log 2 of n, which is the theoretical minimum accessing time. So what we've been able to do is to take the Curd trick and use it to build a computer memory that gives the theoretical minimum accessing time if you have 2 interconnections in your chip. That's what it looks like. And this is for a memory of size 7. I've got to tell you, we have not been able to interest many computer manufacturers in a memory chip with 7 on it. If they're ever interested, I've got the circuit for them. But here's what we've got at the top, the in shuffle. 0 goes to 1, 1 goes to 3, 3 goes to 7, mod 7 is 0. Down at the bottom is the out shuffle, 0 goes to 0, 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 4, 4 goes to 8, mod 7 is 1. We keep track of the read-write port. Data request comes in, the arithmetic logic unit computes RW minus Q mod 7. Its output, if it is a 1, it clocks the in circuit. If it's a 0, it's inverted and clocks the out circuit. And then in the theoretical minimum time, we have shifted the data by the exact amount required. And so I'd like to think what I did in the last 57 minutes was to show a surprising connection between magic tricks and card shuffling and dynamic computer memories. Do you have any questions? Thank you. I'll tell you something fun about the book. When I wrote the book, the 14th word of every chapter is the word deck. Now, on a book on card shuffling, you would not be surprised to find the word deck in there. You'd be surprised to find the word elephant or anaconda or butterflies, but deck, no, you'd expect that in a book on card shuffling. Why would I do that? Well, dice are built so that 1 is opposite 6, 3 is opposite 4, and 2 is opposite 5, so that opposite sides add to 7. If I take 2 dice and roll it out, and I tell you to add the numbers on the top and bottom together, you'll always get 14. You're now beginning to see why I picked 14. So what happens with that book, it's called a forcing book, you make a prediction. If you're smart, your prediction will be deck. You put your prediction on the table. You say to someone in the audience, I want you to take this. I heard this guy give this strange lecture, and he claimed there was a mathematical way of predicting the future. It's hard to believe, but I think I can do it. I've got a prediction here. Here's his book. Open it to the beginning of any chapter, the index, the bibliography, I don't care. Just open it to the first page of that chapter. You've got the page? Okay, they open it. Now here's what I want you to do. Take this pair of dice, roll it out on the table until you're satisfied you have a random number. Add the numbers on the top and bottom. Count to that word in the chapter. I mean, there's no way I could have known what chapter you'd picked. There's no way I could know what number you'd wrote. Magicians lie all the time. What word did you get? Deck. You know, that guy who gave the talk is smarter than I thought. And then you show your prediction. That's one of the fun things about the book. Now here's something I'm going to do. Last May, in the Linking Ring magazine, this is the publication of the International Brotherhood of Magicians, I published the solution to a trick. David Burglas, the late David Burglas, was president of the Magic Circle. He was famous for a trick that it has 2 names, the Burglas effect, or any card at any number. Now here's what Burglas would do. He'd bring out a deck of cards, toss it. Now, the Burglas effect has never been videotaped. So you can only rely on someone's description, which let me tell you is not very accurate. Magicians rely on that. Burglas would put out the deck and he would say, you sir, would you name a card? You ma'am, would you name a location? Queen of Hearts, 27. He'd open the deck of cards and count down to 27, and there would be the Queen of Hearts. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. I can't do that trick. But here's what I can do, and here's what I'm going to try to do, is a variation of that. I'm going to have someone name a location. I'm going to have someone name a card. Then I'm going to do exactly 6 perfect shuffles. No more, no less. I'm committing myself to what I'm going to do. I have no idea what card will be named. I have no idea what location will be named. And I'm not going to spoil the climax and tell you what's supposed to happen. Though if you saw the foreshadowing earlier in the talk, you may guess what's going to happen after those 6 perfect shuffles. Now, I have to do some calculations. I wish I were good enough at maths to be able to do this in my head. I need a card. Would someone name a card, please?
King of Diamonds.
King of Diamonds. Would someone name a and by the way, the deck of cards has a joker, so there are 53 locations. Did you want to name the joker? I didn't.
No.
Okay, King of Diamonds it is. I need a location. You've got 53 choices from 1 to 53.
42.
22, did you say, or 32?
42.
Well, 42, okay. So we're going to finish at 42. I have to make that, because I'm doing everything modulo 3, I'm adding 53 to it. 42 plus 53 is 95. That means I'm going to shift it by 43. So her card started out in his card, the King of Diamonds, started out in position 52. You want it to end in position 43, I have to shift it. You want it to end in 42, I have to shift it by 53. Okay, so that's going to be, let's see, I have to convert 43 to a binary number, so that's 1/32, no 16s, 1/8, and now up to 40, no 4s, 1 1. 1 0 1 0 1 1. I'm going to do an in shuffle, an out shuffle, an in shuffle, an out shuffle, and 2 in shuffles. Now, while I don't want to complain about Queen Mary and the higher playing performances, this is where the band strikes up a snappy number while I'm doing the, but Peter explained the band was previously occupied and they couldn't get them tonight. So that's okay. This, by the way, is the deck we'll start with. I'm going to try in 6 shuffles to see what will happen. Okay. First one I need to do is an in shuffle. One in shuffle. Now I need to do an out shuffle. So that's 27 and 26. One out shuffle. We're 1/3 of the way through. Now I need to do an in shuffle. An in shuffle. We're halfway through. I need to do another out shuffle. Oops, I was 1 card off. Have to have 27 and 26. There's my out shuffle. 2/3 of the way through. 2 shuffles left to go. I need to do an in shuffle and an in shuffle. There's my first in shuffle. One more in shuffle. Oops, again missed by 1. That's the problem with presbyopia. I can do the sleight of hand. The eyes are failing. Oops, missed by one card. It has to be absolutely perfect. Okay. Oh, come on, come on. Last card. All right. There's my end shuffle. Now, I just did the 6 shuffles. Chosen card was the King of Diamonds. The location was 42. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. Now, I figured as long as I was going to trouble to do that, I might as well put the deck back in new deck order. So I went ahead and did that while I was shuffling the cards, so you can see. Thank you. It's nice to do this when people know who Burglas is. Yeah, I know I'm among friends. As soon as I say the Burglas effect, yeah. Okay. I don't know if you have these obnoxious late-night television commercials in the UK that we have in the US, but wait, there's more. In fact, there is more. The Material Sciences Department here at Queen Mary has done something very exciting. Now, I don't know what they're going to show, but let me tell you what the question came up. Those of you that work with a deck of cards, and I've got some on the front row here, know the difference between a new deck of cards and a broken-in deck of cards. If you hand me a brand new deck of cards, it's stiff, it's a little bit slippery, and before I do a performance, I always break the cards in. I shuffle them a little, I handle them. I'm not sure what I'm doing to them, but I know that they're different. So after I've done, handle them for 10 minutes, they're broken in. They're ready to work with. They're easier to shuffle, they're easier to handle. I had several hypotheses. One is I may be breaking the fibers in the paper to change the flexibility. For the slipperiness, when the cards are cut out with a big die, and when they cut it, fine paper dust is produced. Maybe paper dust is on the surface of the cards, like fanning powder, or like baby powder that makes them slippery. So when I'm handling them, all I'm doing is getting rid of paper dust. If you look at the surface of the cards, it's slightly dimpled like a golf ball. Maybe when I'm handling the cards, I'm getting oil from my skin in the dimples. Or maybe by friction, I'm wearing down some of the dimples. Whatever it is, a broken-in deck of cards is different. When I first met Professor McOwen and we were talking about this, he said, well, we've got a material sciences lab here. That might be fun to do. Well, a couple of months ago, I had a deck of cards and I just broken it in and I said, oh, Professor McOwen might like to see these. So I popped them in an envelope and I mailed them over. Now, I've got to tell you, I've taught enough semesters of statistics, I should be ashamed of myself. You can't do very many statistics with one object. I mean, analysis of variance just doesn't work. Chi-squared doesn't work. But anyway, I sent him the deck of cards that I had just broken in. He turned it over to the Material Sciences Department, and Professor Andy is going to tell us what they discovered.
Thank you, Brett. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
There we go. We'll just get a little bit of a presentation here. So, why does a broken-in deck of cards seem different to the one that's fresh out of the factory? That was the question posed, and very kindly, Peter McGowan broke in some cards for me as well. He claims that he did this outside office hours, of course.
Absolutely.
Although we're not convinced that the vice principals haven't got some kind of game going on in Quimsey, but still. So we thought we'd throw some material science techniques at the problem and see whether we could answer some of these questions. Why are they different? And it's interesting that they become different very quickly, which is quite a cue. So we threw some of our toys at the problem to see if we could answer this question. Which way forward? So the first thing we had to do is look at the surface of the cards in a lot of detail. So we have some very powerful microscopes here in the Nanovision Center where we can look at the surface detail on the cards. And the cards are, of course, mostly made of paper, which is a bunch of cellulose fibers bound together. And then playing cards have a very nice polymer coating on the surface that you can see here that make them uniformly slippery. And then the coating has little dimples in it, like a golf ball that you can see there. And I think what they do effectively is not trap oil on the surface, but trap air on the surface so the cards don't stick together. And that keeps them slippery. And potentially, when you're breaking them in, you're trapping the air nicely in those pockets. But maybe the edges of the cards get damaged as well. But in fact, when we compare brand new cards on the left here with broken in cards on the right, there's really no difference at all. There's a few little bits of debris on the broken in cards, but nothing much. There certainly isn't time to accumulate a lot of finger grease and bacteria and so on the surface of the card. So I'm not convinced that that's the answer. But they certainly feel different, don't they, Brent?
Yes, absolutely.
So we did some feely kind of tests with some mechanical testing machines, which goes something like this. So basically when you flex a card, you're buckling it and bending like this, okay? And so Peter showed me some cards that he'd broken in, and I found that I could get exactly the same response by simply flexing them backwards and forwards 10 times, okay? So then when we test the buckling, oh, my video's disappeared. Oh, interesting. Going to reappear? Oh, they never work on anybody else's computer, do they? So the black line there is the response we get when we squash a card and buckle it when it's been broken in by Peter, and the red ones are ones where I flex them backwards and forwards. Okay, and apparently they're exactly the same. The force that you need to make them buckle is the same. If we take a brand new deck straight out of the packet, open it, do the same thing, the first time we flex them, they come out as the blue lines up here. And they're slightly stiffer. But more interesting than that, as you flex them, the stiffness starts to become more uniform. And so you can see the flexed cards, the red line there, they become more uniformly stiff from one end to the other. And I think that's why the cards end up shuffling more easily, Brent, because they end up more uniformly stiff. But this is very early days, and we can probably conclude at the first outset that the edges and the surface of the card are not different, but there's around a 12% difference in the buckling stiffness of the cards that then becomes more uniform across the card. So that's as far as we've got to. We'd like to continue doing this over the summer if we can. So if there are any volunteers out here who'd like to spend a bit of their summer right here in the front row, excellent. We'd like to investigate this a little more and maybe put some more statistics to the problem.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's exciting.
It is. So
This is practical science.
It is, absolutely. So thank you for that, Andy. Insightful. We genuinely are looking for people who can faro shuffle and would want to shuffle cards for us. A control group of magicians would be quite nice. We could lock you in a room, give you biscuits, and you could shuffle the cards for us, because nobody has actually solved this particular problem. When Brent and I both discussed it, it just seemed, well, let's throw millions of pounds worth of research equipment at it and see if we can solve something really important. I'd like to ask you all to finally join in a massive round of applause, both for Andy and for Brent, who has given a really fascinating lecture and who is going to be available afterwards and here for you to chat to, show card tricks to, and all that kind of stuff. But a big rousing round of applause for my fellow colleagues.